That way.
Yes, you just saw what you just saw. Unfortunately, a police officer shoots her own reflection while clearing a house during response to a residential burglary alarm. And since this happened once, it can happen again. And we obviously don't want that to happen. So back on the channel is Drew Moldenhauer. He is owner of Blue Ethos Training, and he is a specialized instructor when it comes to situational awareness. And he's going to talk about many different things to consider, but also explain one key exercise that any officer can do to help with their job performance. Let's get right to it with Drew breaking down this incident from a learning perspective.
Drew, I watched the video and a lot ran through my mind. You watched the video and I'm sure a lot ran through your mind. What are just some of your initial thoughts?
Yeah, when I first watched it, I had that shock, watching that video. It was definitely something that was unexpected. Didn't expect to see something like that just coming down and for that officer to fire into the mirror. But when I approach things, I look at it as how can we learn from this event? So when I look at some kind of mistake an officer makes, I don't judge at that time. I try to learn. And we've all made mistakes in our career. And this one was something that definitely didn't mean to happen. But then I start to question, how did this happen? How can we learn from this incident? And one of the things that I look at is this some sort of training failure that maybe during firearms training, this officer wasn't taught the decision-making process where it was almost like a robotic action. And the other thing I thought about when I saw this was her finger possibly on the trigger right away. And then when a stress response hit, she automatically just started firing that gun. And it was kind of a surprise to her. But then again, she had almost like this interesting kind of laughter afterwards, like, I know I just screwed up. But I want to ask that question is, what does the training program look like for this? What is the firearms training? Is there some kind of decision-making process that they do with a non-lethal threat versus a lethal threat? Is their finger on the side guard or is it in the trigger actual area? Because that just seemed like it was a couple shots that rang out really fast, almost on like a stress response. So those are some of the questions I have about this.
Yeah, I see your point. One thing I was wondering was not only, okay, what level of training has this officer received or not received, like a lack thereof, from the department, but let's focus on what are some things you advise officers to regularly practice on their own to avoid something like this happening?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things too that I just noticed, especially with this one, was there was no commands. It was right away just shots being fired. And again, I think that's where it came to a stress response where her finger was in the trigger, something startled her and she just started firing. And so for that, what I would really tell officers and the ones that I would train when I was talking to them is having mental rehearsals. Hey, if that bank were to be robbed right now, where would you go? How would you set up? What would you say on the radio? And as you do that and you're driving around your environments, you're thinking about those things. Okay, if I were to go into this house right now and I get called to a burglary response or I get called to some kind of response in this building, what am I going to do? How am I actually going to surround this building? When I do go in, what am I going to do? Where's my finger going to be? If I see someone, how am I going to call them out to a safe environment where I have control of them versus chasing after them? And as you're doing that, and as you're having these mental reps and these scripts built into your brain, you will perform better during those incidents. And I think when I saw something like this was just one of those reactions that probably a lot of training failures here, or like you said, lack there of training, a stress response that had her pull the trigger a couple times. And then, like I said, there was no commands given at all. If what did you see? Why wasn't this person called back to you? Again, trying to learn what was going through her brain during that time.
When it comes to residential room clearing or an office building room clearing, any kind of room clearing, what are some things you advise regarding how an officer can maintain their composure mentally and physically going through that?
Yeah, one of the things that I recommend, and this is just again sitting down with a couple Navy SEALs that I've talked to as well, and just been through some really good training when it comes to this, is box breathing. So when you can come into a situation and your sympathetic nervous system is on high alert, right? Your fight flight response is going up. That's a normal thing to have happen because we're starting to get adrenaline and cortisol filling through our veins and it's keeping us alive, which is good. But at the same time, they'll shut off the process to our prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking brain. And so a lot of the times we're going to go right back to the way that we are trained. And to slow that heart rate down, if you box breathe, so if you inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, then hold for 4 seconds, you're going to start to engage your parasympathetic nervous system, which is more your yoga brain, which is more of your relaxing nervous system that's going to bring that heart rate level down so you can get back to clear thinking. And especially when you're going through these scenarios, working on breathing is so important because if you're super jacked up, you're going to drive faster. You're just, again, you're not thinking rationally. You're going to go right back to the way that you were trained. And with this one, I think there was a lack there of training, or the training wasn't really implemented very well in this situation.
Let me add just a little bit on box breathing, to which I'm glad you mentioned that. That is crucial, even like in daily life, encountering
Yes.
stressors. It just when the negative emotions start surrounding us, like, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? Or I have so much to do. It's amazing just what a few rounds of box breathing can do to trigger our logical brain to say, all right, here's the action I need to take and how to proceed forward. Without the high emotional state. But what I've learned, expanding your diaphragm and contracting it, not through the chest, because if we do it through the chest, that's signaling to our body more stress. So you could be
Right.
taking a deep breath, but you got to do it from the stomach. That gets you that wholesome
Right.
level of oxygen, which is optimal for you. So just a little tidbit out there. I did want to shift kind of now from individual officer to the department. To be honest, Drew, I just saw the video. I've been looking into this. I don't even know what department it was. Other people might, but
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if you were contacted by this department for your situational awareness training, I mean, what things would you recommend this department do when it comes to a training standpoint, a wellness standpoint, because this kind of mistake, everyone makes mistakes, but this was someone could have been hurt and or killed, and that's obviously somewhere we don't want to go. So, what could they do?
I think that one of the first things to do too is interviewing this officer and just finding out what were you thinking during this incident? What was going through your brain? And really start doing a deep dive with that officer to find out a couple of things. What is there anything going on in the personal life? Is this a fatigue thing where it came down to how much sleep did you get? Starting to rule out some of these things and getting their point of view as to what happened. There's that learning point that I talked about where you're turning off the judging, you're turning on the learning. Like what was going through your mind when you had this? Did you have some sort of mind drift? And then again, when it comes to situational awareness training, that's all about your perception, your understanding, and then your prediction. And I think that's so important at this part that when you're having this perception, you're going into this building, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What is going through your brain? Then the understanding part. Sometimes the puzzle pieces don't fit, and you need to ask yourself those questions. What does this mean? Is this what I expected? Is this normal? And as you're doing that, we can have a little bit of a breakdown of that perception part and the understanding part of what's going on in my environment. And then the last part, and I think this is so crucial for police officers, is that prediction process. And that's what I'm saying in your training, you have to implement some sort of decision making process in there. So, for an example, you're in this pursuit, you should be thinking 5 to 7 steps ahead with that pursuit. Where I'm coming up to my town now. This was a rural location. Now the pursuit's heading here. I have to either take this person out right now with a pit maneuver, or I need to disengage on this pursuit because we're coming up to a residential area where there's going to be people walking. And that's what I'm talking about is that decision making process. So on this one, take an accurate prediction. You're going into this building. If I see someone, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to make sure that I call them back to me in a safe area. I'm going to keep my finger on the slide of the gun, not inside of the trigger part. So I think a lot of that comes down to that decision making process that we have to have because this one looked like there was training failures and it was just a stress response that caused this to happen. But again, I think there should be a good interview of this officer to ask what was going through your mind when this was happening. What do you think happened? What was happening here with your training? How were you trained during an incident like this, and see if there is a lack there of training as well.
Very good points, Drew. I know we could talk about this a heck of a lot longer, but I want
Yeah.
people to follow you as best they can so far as learning from your content. And heck, we never know who's listening. Maybe they can have you come to their police department and train them on situational awareness and some other things that you teach about. So, how can someone get in touch with you or follow what you provide?
Yeah, again, Drew Moldenhauer. My company that I own is called Blue Ethos Specialized Training. We do active threat preparedness training, de-escalation training, situational awareness training. Situational awareness has really picked up. I teach this to electrical line workers all the way to gas and oil, police, fire. Right now, the ones that have really picked up on this training has been phenomenal, has been telecommunicators, especially just having that training for them when they're sitting behind at their ECC and they have to gather all this information and they have stress transference going on, all sorts of different things that way. Just got invited to speak at the National APCO conference coming up here in July in Baltimore. So I'm very excited about that. But I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can look up Drew Moldenhauer or Blue Ethos Specialized Training. Get a hold of me. My email is drew@blue-ethos.com. Would love to talk to you more about this.